Okay, in the previous lecture, we learned what a valid argument is, and we went over 6 types of arguments in particular that are known as rules of inference. And you're going to want to have those notes with you because we're going to use those rules of inference today. I'm going to show you how to use those to construct a larger argument. Okay, so let's go over those rules names one more time. We did modus ponens, modus tollens, generalization, specialization, elimination, transitivity. Oh, and there was one more, proof by cases. So there was actually 7 rules of inference. Okay, here's what we're going to do today. We are going to figure out where you left your glasses this morning. And we're going to figure it out using those rules of inference. I'm going to write down 5 facts that we're going to use to find your glasses. Number 1, if I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen, then my glasses are on the kitchen table. Number 2, if my glasses are on the kitchen table, then I saw them at breakfast. Number 3, I did not see my glasses at breakfast. Number 4, I was reading the newspaper in the living room, or I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen. And finally, number 5, if I was reading the newspaper in the living room, then my glasses are on the coffee table. Okay, so you have these 5 facts that you know, okay, that you can tell yourself. You know that these 5 things are true. Okay, let's just label those facts 1 through 5. Okay? Now what I want you to do is I want you to read those 5 facts to yourself again, and I want you to figure out where your glasses are. Okay? I'm going to give you some time to think about it. Go ahead. Okay, did you figure it out? If you haven't figured it out yet, then pause the video and finish figuring out where your glasses are, and then start the video up again, okay? If you concluded that your glasses are on the coffee table, then you are correct. That's where the glasses are, on the coffee table. Now, if I asked you to explain your logic, how do you come up with them being on the coffee table? I'm sure you could probably give a pretty good explanation. You'd probably say something like, well, I didn't see my glasses at breakfast, so they can't be on the kitchen table, which means I wasn't reading the newspaper in the kitchen, so I must have been reading the newspaper in the living room, and therefore my glasses are on the coffee table. Most people could put that into words. But here's what's much harder to do, to take one more step in your logic and say, here's where I used the rule modus ponens, here's where I used the rule transitivity, and stuff like that. Okay? We naturally, inherently understand logic to a certain degree. But it's quite a bit harder to take that extra step and to actually diagram the logical argument and say which rules of inference were used at each place. So that's what I want to go over with you. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We are going to write down the 5 simple statements that those 5 facts are constructed from. Okay? So one statement that I see there is, I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen. That's a statement, right? So let's write that down. Let's call that statement P. Okay. What's another statement that I see that's being used? Well, here's a statement. My glasses are on the kitchen table. Let's write that down and call it Q. And the first fact that I have written up above is a combination of P and Q, right? In fact, how would you write that up there? You would write P implies Q, right? Isn't that what fact number 1 says? Okay, what other simple statements do you see that are being used to construct those 5 more complex statements? Here's a new one that I haven't written down yet. I saw them at breakfast. I think I will add a couple of words there just to make that a little bit more specific. What is them? Them is your glasses, right? I would prefer it if that sentence said, I saw my glasses at breakfast, okay? I think it's a little bit awkward there to just say the word them. So let's fix that sentence. Okay, and I'm going to write that down below, and we'll call that statement R. Now you might stop and get confused here. You might say, oh, but wait a minute. But I didn't see him at breakfast. That's what the next fact says. Okay, that's true. I'm not saying, here, let me call this R. I'm not saying that R is true. Okay? All I'm doing right now, I'm not making any claims here of what I'm writing in green. Those are not claims of things that are true. I'm simply writing down the statements that were used to construct the 5 true statements above. Okay? All right, what other statement do I see in there? Well, you might say this, and it would not be wrong. You might say, oh, here's another one. I did not see my glasses at breakfast. That's true. That's another statement that I do not yet have written in green. But let me ask you a question. Do I need to write that in green? I don't think I do, because that is just the negation of R. So I don't need to give it its own name, because it already has a name, the negation of R. We should try to introduce as few variables as possible. So since that statement I highlighted in blue is the negation of R, then I would rather just call it that and instead of giving it its own variable, okay? Because we would like to have as few variables as possible. All right, let's move on. What else is a statement that I do not yet have written in green? A simple statement. I was reading the newspaper in the living room. I don't have that one written down yet. Oops. Let's call that statement S. Okay, what else do I need to write down? Right after that, in fact number 4, it says I was reading a newspaper in the kitchen. Well, I already have that written down. That's statement P. So let's move on to fact number 5. I was reading a newspaper in the living room. We already have that written down. Oh, here's a new simple statement that we haven't written in green yet. So let's write that one. My glasses are on the coffee table. Let's call that statement T. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to diagram a logical argument where we can conclude from those 5 given facts, we can conclude that your glasses are on the coffee table. Okay, these would be our premises. And our conclusion would be, my glasses are on the coffee table. Okay, let's diagram out the argument. And this isn't the only way to do it. There's lots of different ways to form an argument that would work. Okay, this is just the way that I'm going to do this. So, what I can say is, what can I say from 1? What does 1 tell me? Use the variables P, Q, R, S, and T. 1 is telling me if I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen, which is P, then my glasses are on the kitchen table, which is Q. So I can say P implies Q. Okay? And what am I using to say that? I am using statement number 1. Let's put our reasoning in red. Statement number 1 is telling us that P implies Q. Okay? What is statement number 2 telling us? If my glasses are on the kitchen table, then I saw my glasses at breakfast. So isn't that saying Q implies R? Okay, that's going to be useful. Let's write that down. And what's my reasoning for that? Premise number 2. Okay? All right, now, just from those 2, before we go any further at all, can you make any small conclusion just from those 2? Think about it. If I was reading a newspaper in the kitchen, then my glasses are on the kitchen table. And if my glasses are on the kitchen table, then I saw them at breakfast. Can you shorten those together into one statement? Isn't that really telling you that if you were reading the newspaper in the kitchen, then you saw your glasses at breakfast? In other words, if P implies Q and Q implies R, then doesn't that mean that P would have to imply R? It does, right? In fact, look at your 7 rules of inference from yesterday, and that's one of the rules of inference. Which one is it? If P implies Q and Q implies R, then P implies R. Isn't that transitivity? Okay, let's move on from there. So now we've gotten this far. If I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen, then I saw my glasses at breakfast. Now, what useful piece of information should I point out now? I think I should point out that I didn't see them at breakfast. In other words, what is that? That's the negation of R. And what is my reasoning? That's premise number 3. Now, let's look at these two. P implies R along with not R. What conclusion could I make from that? If I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen, then I saw my glasses at breakfast. But I did not see my glasses at breakfast. So, what can you conclude? You must not have been reading the newspaper in the kitchen, right? In other words, the negation of P. Now look at those 3 lines. P implies R, along with the negation of R, allows me to conclude the negation of P. That's one of your 7 rules of inference. Look at the list and see which rule of inference is that. That's one of the ones with the funny names. That one is called modus. Which one? Tollens. Okay? So what have we figured out so far? We have figured out you were not reading the newspaper in the kitchen. That's what we have figured out so far. Okay? All right, where should we go from there? What does premise number 4 tell us? I was reading the newspaper in the living room, or I was reading it in the kitchen. So, that's S or P, right? S or P. What is my reasoning for that? Premise number 4. Now remember, that's called a disjunction of S and P, and remember that disjunctions are commutative, which means if you prefer, you can write P or S. It really is up to you. Okay? All right. Can I make any new conclusion now? Look at these 2 lines here. Can I make any conclusion from those? I was not reading the newspaper in the kitchen, but I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen or the living room. If you put those two together, then you can make a conclusion, can't you? Where must you have been reading the newspaper then? You must have been reading it in the living room, right? If you're reading it in the kitchen or the living room, and you're not reading it in the kitchen, then you must be reading it in the living room. So using those two lines that are highlighted in yellow, we can conclude that you were reading the newspaper in the living room, which is S. Which rule of inference am I using there? I'm combining P or S with the negation of P, and that allows me to conclude S. Which rule is that? Look at your list. That is elimination. Okay? We're almost done. Where should we go from here? So we have so far reached the conclusion you were reading the newspaper in the living room. Where can we go from there? Well, look at premise number 5. If I was reading the newspaper in the living room, then my glasses are on the coffee table. How would you diagram that? That would be diagrammed S implies what? T. What is my reasoning? Premise number 5. Now put these two lines together, and what conclusion can you make? I have S implies T combined with S gives us what? Gives us T. What rule of inference did we just use there? That's the other funny named one. That's modus ponens. And I think we're done, aren't we? Because what did I just conclude? My glasses are on the coffee table. So that is our final conclusion. Let me just bump it over and put our symbol here for therefore. And that is the argument in logical form of where your glasses are. Given those 5 premises, we make the conclusion that your glasses are on the coffee table. And that's how you diagram the logical argument. And in red, so in blue, I should say, in blue are our statements. And in red is our reasoning. Okay? And we started with 5 premises, but we constructed 3 more premises. Let me point that out. We started with these 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We constructed 3 more premises, which were each small conclusions of their own, which is this one, and this one. So we ended up with a total of 8 premises. And then the last one is our conclusion. A lot of times you'll see people draw a line above the conclusion, kind of like an addition problem, you know, where you draw a line under all the numbers being added up, and then you put your sum under the line. Okay, so that's how you logically diagram an argument. And here's, I want to repeat this, okay? Most of you, I'm confident, read those 5 sentences in black and figured out where the glasses were based upon those 5 sentences. Because it wasn't a hard task, was it, to figure out that your glasses are on the coffee table? And if I asked you to explain, how do you know they're on the coffee table, you could probably have explained it pretty easily, okay? Because that's the intuitive level of logic that we just pick up over our lifetimes, okay? But I need you to go further, and it's that last step that is abnormal for us. And that is not just, can you explain it to me in your own words, but can you explain the argument using the terms of logic? Using the terms implies, negation, modus tollens, transitivity, and things like that. That's what you will hopefully be able to learn from this class. Okay, so if you ever need to brush up on forming a logical argument and how to write it out using the symbols and give your reasoning, then just come back to this lecture and watch it again.